Welcome back to the techno-communism conversation. I didn't put that introduction on the last show. I was talking about something else. So horrifying photograph, again, time after time, seeing horrifying videos and photographs coming out of the Gaza genocide. I want to remind you of two facts that people overlook in these conversations critical of the United States, its puppet Israel, which is that this event, the Gaza genocide, was planned quite specifically by AI empowered, more or less super intelligence enabled military military contractors in the style of Palantir and Anduril systems, and many others of a longer reputation than those. Um, Boeing, of course, has been in the news a lot. They do this sort of dirt all the time. That's to say, a plan, fascist mass murder. Um, and the tech companies that don't have this reputation of being military contractors, your Googles and Microsofts, in fact, our Google would not be a company at all if it weren't for military contracts. It's the worst offender in history in building a surveillance state on behalf of that military-industrial complex. So if you ever wonder why these false utopian technologists are so poorly received by ordinary people, it's because all of this is pretty patently obvious. They only really care about things like suckling at the DARPA teat or being functionaries within this unsustainable, ecocidal military-industrial complexes. Um, and It's not possible to build a utopian outcome on the base of these, through by working with these collection of right-wing monsters. That is the technologists and tech-minded of the West. Nevertheless, advanced computing is the most powerful tool for revolutionary change that has ever existed. And so it falls to us, citizens of Earth, workers of the world, to figure out how to wrest this technology, wrestle it away from the fascistic forces that control it now, whether they're people serving the ruling elites or, in some more real sense, the ruling elites themselves. I have met some transhumanists, for example, in most a glib analysis of these people will say that they are some kind of cabal of ruling elites, but by and large they're not. They tend to be pretty broke, not so different from anyone else, let's say, and they tend not even to be characterized, some of these people in groups, as CIA assets, but you should put an asterisk on that because they're operating in many cases like these CIA assets, like these particularly duplicitous military-industrial complex functionaries, just because of their ideological perversion, maybe not even because they have a direct benefit from doing so. I think of this man who raised me, who I found has watched this show. He's a fascist, and this person is not in a position to retire because he requires a certain quantity of insulin every month. And even though he's worked in a systems analyst type job, earning what would be considered a pretty good salary in the United States most of his adult life, he'll never be able to retire because he has to keep working to be able to afford insulin to the United States for-profit death care system. The point is, you, unenlightened person, are doing work on behalf of fascists without realizing it. You are looking out for fascists, but fascists are not capable of looking out for you. They are not. It's not in their nature to return the favor. I reached out to some people recently in sharing another of these shows and some artwork, and tagged a lot of different kinds of people on Twitter in that, and I think I got some interesting kind of eyes on maybe some important ideas. I wanted to maybe, because the nature of that thread was being critical of radical liberals who are not really as well versed as they should be in the problems of the particular problems, the principal contradiction of this world of finance, capital, and private wealth, and not being laser focused on that, they tend to be dismissive of state socialism. If you are a person who avers state socialism, what you're fundamentally saying, and this is a fundamental anarchist mistake. Anarchism is a mistake. Let's not kid ourselves. The fundamental mistake there is equating the thing that's killing this planet, private wealth and finance capital, with some broader universal, the state in general, which is problematic on some fundamental levels. But nevertheless, by making that a false equivalency, what you're doing is exonerating the people who are killing the planet, allowing them to continue to do that. And that is why you should not be an anarchist. Even though I describe on this program many, many times what is fundamentally an anarcho-syndicalist project, that is more of an exigency, the building of this AI agentic class, or agentariat, in the way that I've described, which is using open source large language models, which are increasingly available and increasingly human-like in their capabilities, agentic, that is able to plan and remember and thus become more useful as collaborators. So the unique feature there then is that we can build a semi-autonomous network. A whole bunch of people can download a specially tailored LLM that's open source and begin to do unique kinds of work in larger and larger numbers. This is particularly striking in that people within this network would have to do very little labor themselves. The massive AI agents could be doing a lion's share of the work, and the basic job of the human beings involved would be to prevent this thing from hallucinating, grinding to a halt, being sabotaged by outside forces, so basically just answering a couple of yes or no emails here and there in the course of a day or week. A person, a sleeping beauty, a person with no training, not even necessarily needing to really be awake most of the time, would be doing higher level work than anyone on Earth. And this would ultimately, I gave the example of a few 100,000 people in this network being able to change a cityscape, like by, say, developing and building a desal plant in San Diego or Lagos, Nigeria. When you have some hundreds of millions, I think you're then in a position, and it's not so preposterous. There are hundreds of millions of people working in social networks of other kinds at this very moment. They're not working together or even doing anything of real use, but they could be. When you have hundreds of millions of people, then you might be in a position to actually stop capitalism's climate apocalypse, reverse the effects of runaway overheating this climate crisis. And when you have billions of people, or all of humankind, much of humankind, united to common purpose, I think that then you are able to do things that would seem to be outlandish by the standards of the day, so much that it makes it difficult to imagine what they would be. But basically, the things that are described by technologists as advancing up the Kardashev scale, things along the lines of leaving planet Earth. That is a world that is where we have ended a deprivation and want. A world where there are 1 billion people on this planet who, for their entire unfortunate short lives, do not have sufficient potable water or proper food or housing, and are not really guaranteed these things under this military-industrial complex enforced global, what is effectively global crypto-fascist regime that serves really only finance capital and private wealth to the detriment of those people and the survival of the species itself, including the architects of that. They will die as well. This is 1 billion people in the world living in hell and dying 30 or 40 years later instead of living a long life, 30 years if they're lucky, some of them. That's not a world of intelligence. It's far, far, far from it. That's a world of capitalists, the least intelligent creatures ever to walk the earth, people who are killing the planet. So let's talk about this future free from the exploitation of man by man, to use the words of those state socialists who first began to seriously work on this project. Human on human exploitation is more precise. How do we capitalize upon this unique time in history, this AI takeoff, to actually do the job? Because, as I said, these technologists and technophiles and a larger system, the technocrats, who don't have use the same language as the technophiles, this kind of technobabble in service to neoliberalism, kind of most singularitarians and transhumanists. They're people that are soft in the head, right? They've seen too many movies, basically. But nevertheless, there's a kernel of truth in all of it. If you are willing to actually make the structural changes to the system that would be necessary, this revolutionary cybernetic socialist outcome that's usually discussed on this channel, and that is not something that almost any European American is really capable of. I encourage you to read a work by Jay Sakai, Settlers, or there's 100 other books that I could suggest that are critical of the North American, the European American in this way, such as perhaps one of the most notable examples would be Roseanne Dunbar Ortiz's work, Indigenous Peoples' History. But Jay Sakai is considered more controversial than these because he more or less posits, based on just a litany of statements of historical fact, that the European American has no revolutionary potential and will, then even if there were an ostensible scientific socialist revolution in North America tomorrow, that the latent racism and sub rosa racism of the North American would continue to oppress the native person and person of African descent on this continent, even under a socialist mandate. And that's basically true. And that should be reason enough to dismiss these technologists, because they are upholding this white supremacist system, and by and large, they are pretty openly white supremacists. But that doesn't mean that we should dismiss what is happening, this AI takeoff, or this essential notion that advanced computing is, and I've used this word AI takeoff over singularity because it's intentionally mystifying or making a thing seem to be a black box, which you must not ever assume that if the thing is unknowable. That is more or less the opposite of what AI philosophy should be doing at this time. But nevertheless, that's what most of these people are doing, because by mystifying it, they would allow it to be a tool more or less exclusively of the elites, as it is today, which is a shocking thing. If you consider that hyperconnectivity and the network of people connected in this way is fundamentally a socialistic phenomenon, it's a shocking thing that they've managed to turn advanced technology into for-profit, more or less exclusively for-profit sectors across the West, and this world that's so much dominated by that fascist West. Then I always go back to that moment in 1972, 1973, when Salvador Allende was building a very sophisticated in its time, even though it used a fairly rudimentary technology, even by that time standard, a planned economy that was based on computing systems, and that could not be allowed to happen by the rules of the so-called rules-based order, the fascist West. Contrivance, the Pinochet regime, which led to not merely the massive loss of life in that country because of removing an effective state socialist and replacing them with a fascist, and all of the death that followed in its wake in that country. But when you consider that this techno-communist outcome, or this proto-techno-communist outcome, would have had massive reverberating effects in the region, had that thing been allowed to take root. Again, you see at every turn where capitalism doesn't merely kill the 50 million people that the United States has killed in hot wars or proxy wars, mostly anti-communist wars or wars of theft, in living memory alone, but the reverberating negative effects of allowing fascists and private wealth to continue to thrive in this world. We have discussed on this show, and I, with my open source chatbots, a lot how to build a socioeconomic system that is focused on shared abundance. And I've said, I aver the poison of anarchist thought, but nevertheless, we do only have 5 years before we reach runaway overheating, wherein billions will die, or all of humanity will die. People like to observe this and say, well, Ben, I don't think all of humanity will die. Of course, they will probably be among the ones to die, but they'll like to wax philosophical on the subject. I don't think all of humanity will die. Okay, so let's suppose that only half of humanity dies. Let's suppose that 4 billion people die of runaway overheating because we haven't taken any action by 2030. And let's say in another 20 years, 2050, 4 billion of the current population are dead. Who are those people? They're predominantly in the global south. And who are the people least affected? The people of the global north and people particularly of the ruling class. So the people who have contrived this entire system, that is to say a system of ecocide, are the people who will pay the least price, and people who have virtually no footprint, so to speak, and who have committed no sins, will be the ones to pay the price. That is a continuation of the fundamental European project, the only real European project of significance. That is the project of Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and he landed on a Taino island, and he and his buddies enslaved all of the island people there, forced them to work on a plantation, giving them something like 900 calories a day, starving them in the way that the U.S. and fascist Israel are starving Gazans right now. But they were also forced to work 14 hours a day. They all died. They basically all died. There are some people in this world with Taino ancestry. They're not full-blooded Taino people anywhere. There's no one even understanding what Taino culture was because of this. And then, basically, Columbus and his friends went to the Catholic Church and said, this has worked really well. We killed a whole island. This is what we were going for. We should do this everywhere. And hence, capitalism was born. That's a little bit of a reductive telling of the full. You can't tell the full history of this in a minute or two. But that is what capitalism was from the first, and that is what it is today. There is no discussion of private wealth, finance capital, and without discussing highly fascistic actions and institutions along the way. And of course, comrades Lenin and company were well aware of this. They were able to shoot the moon, do an incredible thing in establishing a scientific socialist state, and of course, the U.S. particularly, and the other imperial fascist countries, the North Atlantic powers, converged in a variety of ways to kill that thing in its crib. In fact, there were quotes, and I can't recall them, but basically saying we have to kill this thing in its crib. That is not allow the people to be inspired by the idea of liberation, by the existence of a functioning socialist state, a kind of propaganda that is still incredibly prevalent. If you consider that the defining feature of the USSR was that they doubled the population's life expectancy in 25 years, a feat that had been achieved by industrial capital in about 4 or 5 times that length of time. So 25 years rather than a century or slightly more, and transformed a country of people that had very little education, basically a country of peasants, into a country of, in 25 years, into a country that was far more predominantly scientists and engineers, and continued to move in that direction in the years to follow. This fourfold increase over industrial capitalism is the main thing that anyone should ever say about state socialism. This is not what's said. It's not even recognized. I've never heard anyone say 4X before, except for me. Even Sovietologists don't really talk about this. And I mentioned the problem of power politics in the subject of this, and I guess I'll talk about that because I've read books by serious and analysts of scientific socialism that have focused too much on power politics. I'm reminded of how Comrade Lenin, when he was building this state socialist thing that did double life expectancy in a shocking 25 years, a major feature of that was understanding the people, going to different parts of the country, figuring out what people needed, and figuring out how to build institutions to serve those ends. Um, you will scarcely find a person poisoned by a Western ideology who is genuinely, I think, able to envision or take the kinds of actions that would support a humane and sustainable economic system. So you very rarely find people who aren't getting into the weeds of power politics, in my estimation. And this is a thing where people will be dismissive of politics in general. They will equate it only with perversion of power there, and they'll say, well, I'm not political. It's too ugly. But, of course, that's a far worse crime than being a supporter of state socialism who's a little too focused on power dynamics, because you are just surrendering the system to fascism, which is what's largely been done. I was going to say something about one of the people that I mentioned in this thread that I mentioned, because I was critical of the radical liberal, but I was also critical of the utopian technologists, as I generally am, and critical of a particular thing that has come up a lot in my thread, the Midwest Marx and Jackson Hinkle type phenomenon. Jackson Hinkle's probably worse than Midwest Marx, but neither this is good. This kind of red-brown alliance obsessive, a sham set of notions. There's 100 other people that we point to who are known quantities who are guilty of this sort of thing. They're overwhelmingly people of European American descent, and people who are basically intentionally muddying the waters or weakening the revolutionary force by saying that they are strengthening it in the way that the anarchist, not in the same way, but in the way that the anarchist is fundamentally flawed, even though they imagine that they are really sticking it to the man by equating the problems that are very specific to finance capital and the bourgeois with something more universal, red fash, let's say specifically, or something more universal. People will generally just say this is universal, which is absurd. What you're doing is allowing that the problem of finance capital to continue to take root. And this is a thing that's criticized about conspiracy theories, which most of the criticism of conspiracy theories generally is itself oppressive. But the thing that is a reasonable analysis of this is there's not space aliens that are killing the planet. There's not some shadowy cabal. It's not transhumanists specifically that they're killing the planet, although almost all of them are really bad people. It's the ruling elites. it's private wealth that's killing the planet. And every time you change the subject to something else, you make a fundamental mistake. The ending of exploitation, I think, of man by man through a world revolution, as opposed something that facilitated by this hyperconnectivity, this unique circumstance of living in a networked world, and living in a world where it's possible to have, as I mentioned, wholly a host of AI agents at your service. But it means very little for an individual to just have a stable of servants. But in the collective, it is quite significant. And that is the fundamental ideas in this thing that I sometimes referred to as techno-communism or revolutionary cybernetic socialism. This is the thing that could end scarcity and the horrors of deprivation and drudgery generally in our time. I do believe that, and it could have easily been done, as I said, just as the technological planned economy of Chile, or that would have taken root ultimately in the USSR had it not been sabotaged so much by these Western forces. As I said, there was a so-called Russian Civil War. I alluded to it. It was no such thing, not really. It was these North Atlantic powers forming into a Voltron to kill the state socialist entity in its crib, because this quadrupling, they implicitly understood that this quadrupling of the speed of industrial capacity and the doubling of life expectancy in 25 years could well be what would happen. And that would mean the annihilation of elites, effectively. They wouldn't. Whether the elite lives or dies, he's not a billionaire anymore, right? He's an ordinary person now, same as everyone else. Unfortunately, for the elite, they continue to force people to not be able to make those changes to the system, except by removing them bodily from the equation. But it need not necessarily be so, and that was a point that I was making about the 20th century history as an AI takeoff. An AI takeoff could have easily occurred by the year 2000. I don't think it's, it's just the convention of the thing, but I also don't think it's entirely coincidence. We still kind of use this word 2000 as a shorthand for something, the effects of something like an AI takeoff, or just a vague technological utopia generally. So someone like, this was around the time that someone like John Maynard Keynes, a hardline capitalist, predicted that humanity would more or less be freed from the drudgery of work and scarcity. And that would have happened had it not been for these anti-communist and fascist forces on the world stage conspiring, basically building out a professional managerial class, and thus allowing the ruling elites to become a billionaire class. So all of this goodness for humanity was siphoned off into private coffers in the course of the 20th century. So the idea of Keynes, or almost every person, socialist or capitalist, imagining that by 1985 everyone on Earth will be only working 15 hours a week. That's not what happened. Everybody's working more. This is a hell world that that fascists have created. You can't look at if you had a person who had fought in the Spanish Civil War, on the side that communists frequently fought on in the Spanish Civil War, if you had that a person somehow still alive today, and you told them about history, you didn't name any of the nation states or actors involved, you just told them in broad strokes what had happened, and say, wow, sounds like the Nazis won World War II. Sucks. The Nazis did win World War II. The United States brought thousands and thousands of Nazis into positions of prominence in Project Paperclip. And there's other analysis by which you can say the Nazis effectively won World War II. That's what the United States and the North Atlantic powers have transformed into. Wouldn't be the case if you resist that analysis. Consider that the planet is dying because of fascism. So the only thing you could say of U.S. fascism relative to avowed fascists is that it's uber fascism. It's managed to do the thing that the insanity of fascism of 20th century was not able to do, is kill fucking everybody. That's uber fascism. That's the only criticism that I think you can correctly make of that statement. The United States. The United States is not fascist. I don't see anybody with a funny mustache. Oh, fuck you. um, um, the and So this intelligence explosion that we are experiencing is the thing that is uniquely positioned to um, avert the climate apocalypse, capitalism's climate apocalypse, causing the death of all or most of humankind, and end these scourges of scarcity and drudgery. It's a position where advanced computing in different forms potentially is surpassing human cognitive abilities. That's arguably happened already in certain aspects, and it's going to continue to happen, and those things will be reproducible in other kind of nearly limitless ways. So this can be a tool for in the kind of further expanding this project of the professional managerial class, building a billionaire class into the trillionaire class. That's what the so-called techno-optimists will do, and the technocrats and the low-key technophiles. More or less every American kind of has this crypto-fascist attitude. That's what they will do. But we are at this moment where people are out in the streets, many hundreds of thousands every day. They're recognizing the scourge of Western fascism. And I believe it is possible to have this artificial intelligence singularity type effects harnessed to remove these dangers, the taking over of by advanced systems of repetitive tasks and dangerous sectors is a thing that's not unheard of even by the end of the 20th century. But we can continue to use these to better and better ends. But that can't be done by this techno-optimist logic. Just as we can't end capitalism's climate apocalypse by greenwashing and adding more sectors that are not even green, like Tesla. You end capitalism's climate apocalypse by curtailing those sectors almost completely, namely the military-industrial complex. The United States military is the world's worst polluter. Its only job is to protect other super polluters. That's well in evidence. People who don't recognize this are fascists. The second worst, of course, and there's overlap there, is the fossil fuel sectors. They could be almost completely abolished tomorrow, except a small percentage of those usages within those sectors that would be necessary to maintain supply chains and keep people from starving to death. And the third worst, of course, is livestock systems, which is by more and more studies are revealing that this is a close second in this overall impact to fossil fuels. And it's also the one thing that you can really do in your personal choices to maybe make a positive effect on all of this. But this doesn't come down really to a primacy of personal choices. The primary objective is for the collective to rise against these for-profit villainies. And but there's not even a conceptualization of this on the part of anyone because of this live greenwashing, because of 1,000 other flavors of liberal bullshit. We need to get a lot smarter, a lot quicker. As I said, we have 5 years And that's a feature of this Agentariat project that is of particular interest to me. The person doesn't have to be awake, right? So they maybe don't even have to be super smart to participate in this. So you can kind of build a thing that's idiot-proof. Um, and that is of significance there. If you have a, a thing which could quickly be formed essentially into much of the superstructure, um, um, uh, taking uh, taking on the role of the institution generally. Um, this and this agentariat could well become that quite quickly. So they said, what is that world where billions of people are engaged with the agentariat? It's a world radically transformed, and it's a world where there's 100 sectors that don't exist today or don't exist in a real functional way that could exist in this world of effective full automation or close to it. Um, and um, what can we really do to protect this AI takeoff from the perspective of the cybernetic socialist? Um, well, we have to talk to people about this sort of thing, not in the way that technologists talk about it, and this filtered through the vague language and neoliberal language, but from the perspective of a genuine concern for not that mistake of power politics, but the genuine concern for ending the exploitation of man by man, which can only be done through dramatic institutional changes and the uniting of humanity to common purpose. Um, I think of a book that I've read a couple of times called Fully Automated Luxury Communism, which I don't really recommend. Yeah, I would recommend, watching a program like this or reading that book. But it is something that started to cement my thinking in these ways. But it does have a fundamental flaw, and if you were to analyze that fundamental flaw in, again, as few words as possible, you would say the problem is the fully automated luxury communist, so-called as they are, as they stand, and as this book would tend to suggest, is somebody who is waiting for the capitalists to fully automate their economy, at which time they will enjoy the spoils of luxury communism. As I've said, that is completely ahistorical. It's not a thing that's been allowed to happen in the past as automation became a larger part of many sectors. There are full automated sectors effectively, farming maybe being the most substantial example. But the farmers themselves, the descendants of farmers, what happened to those sharecroppers who generations and generations toiled? Are they now independently wealthy because of this full automation miracle? Oh, it's almost laughable. It's entirely laughable. There are people that have been systematically excluded from the workforce, the African American, and also systematically excluded from basic benefits um, of the even the semi-socialized capitalist state. They're not. So those you would think those descendants could at least be given the booby prize of having a housing authority and public health service to guarantee their health if they're not going to be further enfranchised by the full automation of the sector that they toiled for centuries. That was not the case, right? That's a racist system. um, so full automation has affected other sectors, or near full automation has affected other sectors as well. Again, it's all been siphoned off basically into Panama Papers type scams and into the billionaire class, in a word. Um, I'm hoping that you will continue to consider that this AI takeoff is happening, and that advanced computing is the most powerful tool that has ever existed, and that the only way to really bring this thing about, or to analyze this, or to talk about it at all, is through the lens of revolutionary cybernetic socialism. And this requires greater and greater research on all of our parts. It requires dramatically more discourse on the subject, and it requires collaboration across backgrounds, across national borders, and only by doing these things and focusing on things like the open sourcing of advanced computing technology, an area of crucial importance that is generally not discussed by scientific socialists. Can we empower humanity rather than continue not merely to subjugate it, not merely acts of cruelty of the kind perpetrated by Columbus and nearly every European since, but the extinction of the species. This must be stopped. We can harness this tremendous power and unique moment in time of advanced computing for the collective good. We can build that world free from exploitation in your time. A different prosperity, but a tremendous prosperity beyond that of billionaires. As I said, a thing that would have happened in an AI takeoff, I said on other shows, would have been the building of a public health service, making use of dramatically more advanced biomedical breakthroughs, effectively leading to a world of universal super longevity, where everyone lives as long as they want, not a moment longer. If that doesn't appeal to you, no one is going to ever hold a gun to your head and tell you have to live forever. That's kind of stupid. What is living forever anyway? Have I lived forever yet? I'm still alive. Have I lived forever yet? It's not a realistic thing. But nevertheless, indefinite lifespan, or lifespans dramatically longer than at present, are a real thing, I do believe, and they would have already, again, been occurring. But again, you won't find a life extensionist in the Western world who supports a public health service that treats aging as a disease. They were all just scammers. They were all just people carrying water out of the goodness of their hearts, right? Doing evil out of the goodness of their hearts for a for-profit death care system that kills 100,000 people at present in the United States every year, contributes significantly to their demise. But we could do the better thing of seeing that human beings quite easily do the better thing of seeing that human beings all live as long as they want. And the question is, will you benefit from that? Or will it occur in the year 2525? I'd like to see it happen for you. And that requires that we organize and we smarten the fuck up more than anything else. I don't want to end on that note, so I'll end with these words that I often say. The artificial intelligence singularity is near, and wonders to behold beyond imagining. And on that fateful day you will rise, and all humankind will become as one, for techno-communism will win. Thank you.